I'm very pleased that our panel discussion attracted that many participants. When we, with the organizers, were identifying the topic, which will be topical for the banking sector, we didn't doubt that it is necessary to discuss the issue of renewing crediting. But we talk so much about renewing, regenerating the crediting, that we have to act now, we have to do things now. So the name of this panel discussion is Financing of the Real Sector of the Economy, Time to Act. The Prime Minister of Ukraine yesterday appealed to the National Bank to develop this special program to restore the financing. And quite soon this topic is going to be discussed in various circles of the society. We have very esteemed speakers today, and I would like to introduce to you the first speaker. Oksana Markarova is the first Deputy Minister of Finance of Ukraine. Welcome her. Erik Nayman, the managing partner of the Capital Times, the investment company. Volodymyr Lavrenchuk, the chairman of the board of the Raiffeisen Bank Aval. Andriy Pyshnyy, the chairman of the board of the Oschadbank of Ukraine. Engin, the director of the EBRD in Ukraine. And Engin Akcakoca, the chairman of the Supervisory Board of this Privatbank. And before we start asking questions, I'd just like to screen you a short video to understand what are the conditions of the development of economy of Ukraine as of today, and what we have done within the last 3 years. Because we are saying that things are done very slowly in Ukraine and things which are being done are not efficient, but I would like to put a full stop and see what's been done up to the present, and it will help us later to develop the strategy of what to do next. So the video, please. Thank you very much. And the indicators which we have seen in this video is absolutely extraordinary under the conditions they have been attained. Even after the several years, we cannot tell for sure that everything has been done to restore the lending. And I would like to put the first question, like a blitz question. What are the three factors which are curbing the financing today or lending today? Which are the criteria for you are necessary to restore the lending and crediting and financing, and when? That's the most important question for this audience. What's your forecast? Oksana, let's start from you. Thank you. After such an emotional video, I would like to say the following. We have reached the stability and we started to move forward. We still have to carry out a pension reform and so on and so forth, but we can thank the Parliament for support of the pension reform today, because we are moving in this direction as well. And I hope that the next reforms, the land reform, is going to follow, and all the necessary reforms will follow. As far as the restoring the crediting, what do the banks need to do that? And I think that there are three factors which are needed by the banks and also the state banks, who account for more than half of the banking sector today. We have to resolve the issue with the bad loans, non-working loans, non-performing loans. We have done a lot in this area. The law on financial restructuring is not working in the full scope. We have to pass all the laws which will open the possibilities for financial restructuring, the amendments to the tax laws, and so that the banks would resolve the problems with the non-performing loans and with a minimum impact, negative impact. They already experience losses, so they have to remove them from the books and to start moving forward and to free the time, energy and assets to start moving forward. The second issue is the corporate management. If we are talking about the state banks, we have to move forward, and the standards which work at present in Privatbank and in Oschadbank have to be supported, and we have submitted the draft law to the Parliament, and the corporate standards are going to be expanded to the Oschadbank and the Exim Bank, and we will create the supervisory boards which will help the boards to resolve all the necessary issues. And the third task, and this is the task for the government and the National Bank, we have to move more proactively to liberalization, both currency liberalization, foreign currencies, and the permits to lend. The banks at present have liquidity, both the state banks and the commercial banks, but they have no clients. And due to very tough requirements, these requirements were absolutely necessary when the cleansing of the banking sector took place. But now we have to do everything possible for the banks to be able to take up risks, so that the project financing, financial investments would be possible, and the banks would more proactively participate in these processes. Andriy, the floor is yours. Good morning. Good afternoon. I also would like to follow up the idea which was expressed here. If we give a very simple answer about the three factors, the capital and money, yeah. And in this case, from the point of view of the capital, the state really did a lot to capitalize the state banks and resolve the problems which we have inherited and the consequences which emerged due to the economic recession, the losses in Donbass, the annexation of the Crimea. So these decisions were tough for the state, and the relevant decisions had to be taken, and the banks were capitalized. But we we are trying to keep up with the processes. If we are talking about the state banks as the factor of influence on the development of the Ukrainian economy and its support, we have to change the plane of discussion, and we have to start discussion about the development and growth. Thanks to the Cabinet of Ministers, the decision was taken to reform the corporate management, and the draft law is going to be sent to the Parliament. And I hope that in the Parliament they are going to carry out a very constructive discussion to attain the necessary result. And this will open for us the external borrowing, external markets for borrowing, and a new chapter in the relations with the EBRD. The Oschadbank at present is a strategic partner for the last 12 years, and we are developing it very proactively. The issue of financial restructuring is a very important issue. The law has been passed, and the Oschadbank today is the first bank which went through the procedure of financial restructuring in a transparent manner, on a very using all the infrastructure which has to take part in the process of financial restructuring. We hired legal companies, Big Four, the independent consultants, and we can see that the law is working the way we counted on it. There are certain factors which does not allow us to properly unleash the capital due to the financial restructuring. This has to be discussed both with the National Bank and the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine, and they have to give us an opportunity to obtain the necessary capital which we need for lending. The borrowers, here the situation is kind of strange. In Ukraine, according to the official of statistics, there are 2 million entrepreneurs, 1,650,000 physical persons, entrepreneurs, and 400 big enterprises. Seems to be a lot. But if we start look into this issue deeper, we can see that a huge number of these physical persons, entrepreneurs, to a great extent are the shady sector. They dilute the beneficiary property, or they are servicing the internal offshores, and certain schemes of optimization of taxation are being legalized. What does that mean for the bank? For the business, maybe it's a short-term resolution of certain problem and decrease of the tax load, but for the bank it means the following: we do not see the 1,350,000 entrepreneurs as potential borrowers. Why? Because within the last 3 years, we have started to use the international standards of accounting in terms of evaluating of assets, of the financial monitoring on the international standards. But the entrepreneurial environment has to keep up with that. They have to do financial monitoring, reporting, and we on these standards, and we are ready to help that. So those 2 million entrepreneurs, according to the official statistics, who could be supported to our in accordance with our evaluation, they are not more than 400,000. 25 leading banks told that SMEs is a priority for their activities, and the market is narrow. It's just classical market, 400,000 entrepreneurs, 25 banks, and I would like to be quite sincere. I would like to tell you quite sincerely that we are missing lending. We need to provide lending, and the borrowers which comply with the standards, international standards, European standards, and the standards which comply with our regulatory requirements of Ukraine, well, actually, the borrowers can choose the banks. We have to compete for them. We are not talking about the restoration of the crediting, but we are talking now about the compliance of the entrepreneurs to the requirements. This third issue is the money. We do have the resources. The liquidity of the banking sector is quite sufficient. For the last 2.5 years, we were placing all the all the surplus liquidity into the deposit certificates and so on and so forth. And we understand that this road is it has no perspective from the point of view of development of Ukrainian economy, but it complied with the realities in which the banking sectors was operating. We want to lend, but the resource is quite expensive. So how do we decrease the cost? Certain factors could be used by the state, and I think that this has to be included into the strategy of development of the banking sector. The state has to use the unique, risky, but unique opportunity we have. The state controls 56% of the state banking, of the banking sector. Well, 4 top banks belong to the state, and the state can provide the transmission function. 20.5% is the discount rate at present. We have now to help, if you want, and use the potential of the state banks to decrease the cost of the resources for the whole banking sector, to make it accessible. But for this purpose, we have to move in parallel in accordance with several directions. Improvement and of the work of the entrepreneurial environment, the issues which are related to the capitalization. We are going to have a discussion with the shareholders, and we are not going to resolve our problems, but we are going to discuss the possibility to develop. We are going to talk about 2018. We are going to discuss which structure of the economy we would like to see, and everything is going to be implemented through the strategy of development of the state banks, the borrower, capital, and money. And I believe that, well, it's too late to talk about the restoration, or we are lending at present, but we have to talk about the compliance of an entrepreneurial environment to the demands and requirements of the banking sector. And what is your forecast? When what? When this? When they are going to comply? The Romans had a very good saying: if there is no wind, you take the oars and paddle. And we should not wait. We started a big national support of the entrepreneurship. Well, we do have 2 million. We want to have 2 million real entrepreneurs in Ukraine. It's not only about the money, it's the program about education, collaboration, which we at present as a bank believe is necessary to be started between the regional programs of support of the SMEs and the state programs of the support of the SMEs. I visited Vinnytsia, and we signed an agreement with the municipality which envisages compensation for in accordance with the innovative scheme, the compensation to support the SMEs. Just the essence of this program is the following. The municipality agreed to reimburse part of the taxes to the SMEs, which are being paid by them to the budget. You are financing yourself. How this formula is going to operate is going to be decided soon. This formula has to be understandable by all, but the programs of regional support has to be reloaded all over the country. 4 billion are being planned in the budget to support the agro-industrial complex. So if we add up all the money which is allocated for the regional support in the regions, well, this will be a huge support. Do you know about the regional support programs in the cities where you work? You haven't heard about them because they are not effective, they are not understandable, and they are not working. They are dead. We have to revive them. Well, quite often we are being compared with Poland. And the starting positions were more or less similar, but in 25 years period, they have 480 million of GDP, and we have 90. They have 3.5 million entrepreneurs. We have like 2, but they are not operating all of them. Why so? Because the entrepreneurship is part of the curriculum in the high school, because each voivodstvo has its own regional program of support of the SMEs. We need absolutely different approach. We need to have 2 million entrepreneurs. So let us not wait for the wind. Let us start rowing. We have heard the opinion of the Ministry of Finance, the State Bank, and what is the position of the most successful banks with the foreign capital. Good afternoon. And before I answer your question, do we have a blitz questions or not? If it's blitz questions, so I'm going to be very brief, because I cannot answer this question in one sentence, but hearing the previous session, and the recommendations have been given already by very important people, and I've jotted down the following idea. Janet Watzel, he said that this is from his experience in China, and he said that the drivers of changes was openness to the external world and modernization. The openness to the external world. From my practice and what Nefedov said, that we have 40% of the shady economy, it does not mean that we are open to the external world and even to the internal world. So the perspective of financive depends on to what extent the state invests into the improvement of the investment climate for the business, and to what extent the business becomes open. The banking sector had to become open for the external.
And whether the bankers like it or don't like it, it's just happened here in Ukraine, and the bank sector just became open according to the rules of this world. So what I see in it is an obvious conflict between the state of institutional requirements to the financial sector and to the economy, and I think that should probably be put on the agenda of the strategy when we're talking about the state in general, because not just different culture of production, but different standards of openness to the external world. We wouldn't make it with the mass finance of the economy. I know I'm too negative, but I didn't promise to say only positive things. Still, I would add several more items. Further on, I'll just talk more about it if you allow me to. But the second thing that I would like to say here, which should influence and which does influence directly, would be the price of the money. And the price of this money is a deciding factor. We have our devaluations in our bank. Our bank is doing lots of evaluations, both quality and quantity ones. Over 100 evaluations by sectors of economy, sizes, small business, big business. So it is with great responsibility that I'm not going to name several numbers between you. So only 30% of the clients can service today's interest rates, even though they are very, very low, like record low. So talking about potential consumption, it doesn't depend on the crediting clients, but on the clients which is not credited. Okay, most of the effects can take 1-2 weeks or 1 month, or then they just don't have enough profitability to service the interest rates, which is I know they're record fund. So all this factor, this is very important for me, and it's not just the selective factor, but also the factor of actually strategic decisions. I mean, these rates less than 12. 80% of the economy are going to service the loans, and this is one of the very important factors which I would like to name here, if it's a bliss. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Erik Nayman. The first thing that we need is judicial reform to protect the rights of creditors and investors, because today, if you give the money just as a loan, or you invest in some kind of cash, in some capital or whatever, something mixed between the credit and the capital, unfortunately, the more money you give, the more you'll have to run around to have this money back. And this reform should actually stop this practice that exists today. You know this well. known proverb that it's only the cowards who give back, that this shouldn't be like this. Second is inflation, of course. We have to target it, and it shouldn't be higher than 5-6% interest rate, the annual one, and then it should be targeted to other levels and maybe 2%. And along with the inflation, the cost of the money is going to fall, and then the quality of borrowers would increase, the quality of those who will be able to bring this stuff back, because actually the norm of profit in business, I mean, at least now in the world, there is a trend towards going down. And 20% of interest rate, I mean, it's just very hard to get that, let's say. Not that many businesses can actually afford to support such interest rates. So we really need to decrease the inflation. That's first of all the task of the state, to stabilize state finance, then privatize and, of course, optimize, decrease this share of this sector in economy, because we have very many things here. And in the post-crisis years, there were two waves, 2008, 2014, 15, when the share of the state has only grown. But we understand that the state means increasing monopoly in the economy, and also the increased prices and increased inflation in the country. The third, macroeconomic political stability. But here we have to understand that we cannot simply declare, like, do we have to cement the situation, politics and economy on the current level? Yeah, we had this like that, we had this period, kind of late Yanukovych period, when we tried to do this in 2013. This just doesn't lead anything. So first you have to finish all the started reforms, but it has to be a bit wider and a bit bigger. And then we would get somewhat different quality of economy. And actually, yeah, that's what I think.
A few things. I want to stress the point that you made about the lending climate, that allowing the bankers to feel confident about being able to exercise their legal remedies if things don't go to plan. Bankers are very good at assessing economic financial risk, but nobody would be prepared to take a completely unpredictable legal risk. So that's one thing that needs to be worked upon. I think we also have to move to the next stage of the banking reform, i.e. the consolidation of the remainder of the banks. We still have, I don't know, 95 banks or whatever. That's too many banks. We need to create an environment of bringing stronger regional and then to national banks so that we can have smart competition in the banking system. But to me, one of the most important things is also to create a stimulus, create projects. You know, we plugged the holes, we painted the ship, we steadied it, now we need a propeller. And the propeller has to come from some form of a stimulus, major infrastructure projects that would then generate their own momentum for a whole bunch of enterprises to come up with credible, bankable projects. So we need to really work on where do we find that external stimulus that will kickstart the economy from the present 2 to 3% level growth to 6 to 7, 8% growth that we all need. And that will only happen, you know, through this external, be it privatization, be it some major external funding program that sometimes is being talked about now, the Marshall Plan or things of that nature, that of course needs to be done with a very, very strict, very proper governance structures, but that is what we need.
Спасибо. Engin?
Well, my topic is NPLs. Last few years in Ukraine for me meant non-performing loans. Fighting with the stock and flow of NPLs is as important as capitalizing the banking system or cleaning the banking system from weak banks. Important words of today: protection of the rights of creditors. Without that, flow of NPLs will not stop, and you will not see new lending. Don't be surprised. You will not see new lending. Second important take from this, from the speakers is Sevki's consolidation. Third is from me. No financial crisis is over without assets changing hands, from bad entrepreneurs, ill-willed investors, to new ones, better ones, with goodwill, and at new prices, not inflated prices. Therefore, do we have a remote control for the presentation? How do I skip the pages?
Can you, Erik?
Anyhow, therefore, we should act now and ensure an encouraging tax system. Okay?
Engin, but coming back to our topic, because we started from the very blitz, just three actions which you see major factors influencing restore financing, and then we come back to the NPL because it will be separate topic.
Look, my topic is NPLs.
Okay, so you see this like a main factor.
My topic is NPLs. Without sorting of the NPLs, whatever you're discussing is rowing your boat against the current. The system is stuck with non-performing assets. You have to do something with that. You have to stop the flow of NPLs. How are you going to do it? It doesn't happen by itself. Wanting it doesn't help it also. Therefore, I am saying you should have an encouraging tax system. You should be having an effective system to enforce that. Okay, how did it come? Okay, the second page. Make sure that you amend the KIEF approach law, which was enacted last year, with too many deductions and eliminations. Make sure that you amend it so that it works again. The KIEF approach law was designed to save viable debtors. Viable debtors. Make sure that you get use of it. In Turkey, we restructured more than 600 companies of more than $6 billion. In 1 year, you only restructured 3 names, thanks to him, and 4 is in the pipeline. Only 7 from one law that we worked so hard. Make sure that you amend your bankruptcy law in line with IMF recommendations, or else creditors' rights will not be protected. Make sure that you develop and organize non-performing asset markets. We are now working on an asset resolution company law. Make sure that you acquaint yourself with that law and make recommendations to the NBU. And make sure that you decide on public asset resolution company as soon as possible. Thank you very much. I'm sure I'm going to have too many questions on these.
Спасибо.
Okay, thank you. Actually, we have 2 aspects here, because we have 800 billion in corporate sector and 56% of NPL. But there is a second side to it. 37% are in shadow economy. And if we extrapolate it a little bit, this 800 billion portfolio another one can be done in the economy, which is today, due to different reasons, is not bankable for us. And here I would like to hear your recommendations. What kind of stimuli can be there so that this shadow economy moves to the light side, and so that how we do it so the access to financing for this shadow economy actually emerges? Because today it is no secret that according to certain evaluations, 80% of legal entities in Ukraine, they have double reporting. So even on the light side, we do not use the potential of financing to its full extent. So, Oksana, and then Vladimir Nikolaevich, what could you answer? Okay, let me say here, not just the Deputy Minister of Finance, but also as an authorized person for investments. In our culture, we'll understand that shadow economy is really big, but if we do bans or limits, or if we work more strictly in the tax service, we won't get, and we would never get any results. So on the one hand, and actually we're creating on a new service of financial investigations, maybe, which is going to work on economic crimes, but actually what we're doing is that there should be stimuli for the companies to become transparent and actually leave the shadow. In which way? If we look at the state budget during the last 3 years, you're going to see one surely positive trend would be the increase of capital expenditure. If the budget of 2015 was, let's say, very strict, and mostly it was the expense part was going to the social salaries and all that, each year we are growing the part which is about capital expenditure. And plus, what kind of stimuli are there for the creditors? How the budget can credit them? I mean, this transparent lenders, borrowers. Actually, Andriy was talking about the economic system. For budget 2018, we have 7 billion hryvnias allocated for that. Now we are already working on the orders for finance, how these programs are going to be used. And the main accent here we placed on the fact that the funds spent by the state should go for encouraging. It has to be financed by the banks. So if the state is going just to spend its funds exclusively for stimulating specific enterprise, we're just going to spend this money too quickly and will never have this amount of funds to actually ensure that. But if these funds are going to be spent to involve bank loans for compensation of interest, of raising awareness, so for those who are going to show their activities in full without going to shadow, will going to involve lending additionally, and then there's going to be an additional impetus to become more efficient. This year, in many agricultural programs, we see that. We also see that in supporting the agricultural machine building, so in those targeted programs that were already in the budget this year. So it seems to me that this year we should focus on one hand on the impetus for those who can and who wants to, but on the other hand, we're also working on this gradual implementation. It has to be gradual. So by improving the conditions for those who has this good faith business and giving better service from the point of the tax office, compliance should actually work. And mostly it's also work of the tax office to stop those who violate. This is kind of a two-way street to gradually reduce the shadow sector. But this is an extremely complicated task. It is not a task that can be done in a year. Okay, thank you, Nayman. Is it on Bliss anymore, right? I'm sitting here and thinking, maybe we didn't invite the right people, because about creating the economy, we should have asked business about that. Because the bankers know the answer, and what we are telling now, and I'm going to say as well, probably business is not going to like it. Or it's not really probably they like it, because we are not talking about the way banks are going to create, but also how the business should work. And I see how bankers here is like, mostly they have this positive attitude, but if they were only business, they would like, what are you talking about? when there is project finance, when there is long-term, what kind of new products do you have? Tell us what you have in the portfolio when there's something going to happen. And we just keep talking about compliance, about things like that. And still I'm going to say that. I mean, we live among people, and these people in the court are still going to ask KIEF. But still, so okay, talking about ourselves. So we, the bankers, nothing new is going to happen. I mean, what happened during the last years and what I saw before, I remembered when I just started the banking activities, was still in Brezhnev times. And I'm going to tell you, I mean, I have never seen such strict requirements to the client, even during the Soviet times, I mean, honestly. But our evaluation, the bankers who work with a great amount of applications from the clients and all that, and we're looking at the regulation not just in Ukraine, but also in Central Europe, in the world, because the banking sector is open for the world without any reservations. And it's like this everywhere, and we determine it as a new turn point. I mean, this is not going to go back. I don't think the bankers can be changed with their requirements. I think that we could be talking about the liberalization of foreign currency operations or democratizations, the banking activities and liberalization in the part of managing the risks and credit loan operations. There is not a single signal that we should start this discussion. I mean, I don't think business likes it, but still it doesn't change the situation. So my task here and my function here is to tell you the truth, how we see today's events and how the events are going to develop for tomorrow. So probably you can't expect new products from us or new liberal approaches to the clients, because the situation from the point of regulations is like this, and Ukraine is no exception.
And the item 2, and well, expectations, what can happen. And here I would like to refer to Max Nefedov, who at the first panel represented Ukraine and introduced Ukraine, and he said that the government cannot see the instruments of making the grey market moving into the official economy, but they have to create incentives. And I can agree to that. I can see how the market is being developed, and we are talking to the clients, our partners. People start to understand that this is a point of no return. And this is the issue of speed, of how the company wants to improve its document, to improve the openness and transparency of the business. And it will happen maybe this year, next year, or maybe in 3 years' time. I carried out a number of roundtables in Kharkiv and KIEF with various sectors of economy, representatives of the business. I was impressed by the fact that business has more positive expectations in this area, and they are much more positive than the bankers. And Sevki visited our bank, and he was surprised that the bankers are less optimistic in terms of the business environment will accept the transparent conditions of reporting, or well, within the 3 years perspective. We thought that we were much less optimistic in this respect, but the polling of the clients showed us that they understand the need of it, and it will take place eventually, no matter whether the government is going to use the incentives or just the punitive instruments. There is the Ministry of Finance representative, and the government is represented. I think these preferences in terms of interest rates for certain sectors or clients is a mistake. We would like to give 12% in hryvnia and less. In our bank, at summer this year, when there were these positive inflation trends and deposit trends, we were at 13.5% for new loans for various kinds of clients. We are close to this threshold, and we are not exception. There are the banks who offer this interest rates. The banking sector is still segmented, and the capital is being obtained by all, and there is no danger in this sector, but the NPL is pressing, is exercising pressure with various sort of degree of pressure, depending on how the banks coped with the NPLs. Some have been working on that 5 years, 7 years, and some only for the 7 months. And this depends on how the management of the banks and the shareholders actually evaluated this danger. NPL is a key issue for the banks. We might discuss in detail how to improve it, but we do not have enough time to discuss it now. But I think that the government could do it quickly, Oksana. You know what I'm talking about. And the government can lead to the direction of immediately provide money to the real sector of the economy, but the real sector is not going to accept this money. It's various, and the banks are various. To summarize the answer to your question, I would like to say to what extent the economy or the clients are capable of taking these loans. Well, actually, we had good growth in our bank. It was the record growth of loans to the business. But I think that next year there will be more than 200 banks who will be showing these results. And then if we strategically sort of curb inflation and provide incentives for the official businesses. Item 2, we have been talking about the financing of the economy, but Bankarova is one of the sponsors of this event. It was very popular to finance the mortgages, and it was done on a mass scale. And the ideologues of that time, they were saying that the mortgage financing creates a stimuli for 20 or 30 sectors of the economy. But, well, we should not entertain any illusions without opening the mass market for the real estate market. Well, the financing is not going to decrease because the durables are imported, they are not produced in this country, but the real estate market might really provide financing to the economy. You touched upon a very important topic. Erik Nayman, he is a specialist and he gives macroeconomic forecasts from the point of view of stable growth of the country. At present, should we put more emphasis on the financing of the households or corporate sector? What, in the middle term perspective, would be more effective and efficient? I'm going to be brief. First of all, the money should be given to those who earn the money to provide loans to the businesses, entrepreneurs. We were looking at the loan portfolio, even, well, some B2B projects. I'm not going to provide loans to the consumer, to consumers, and to try to get those loans repaid, hoping that they will get a wage or they will get the money somewhere to repay the loan. It will be a correct approach to provide loans to those who make money. If an individual can buy a car just to drive it for driving's sake, or you might buy a car which you will use in your business, a taxi driver or a transportation of goods or whatever. So those who create value should obtain the loans. But if a person is not creating value and you provide loans to those people, they just waste it because, well, they will have to earn this money somewhere to return the loan, to pay back the loan, repay the loan. I'd like to add, I think that if we would like to talk about how from 2%, 3% to go over to 6%, it's not the question to this panel. And the recipe is not about lending. It's about attraction of investments and increasing the exports. If we would like to move the growth figures, these are investments, and this is where we have to focus our attention, and why the government pays so much attention to this point, and why are we working on that? The maximum attraction, involvement of the foreign investors here, and investment in the sectors which have export potential and using the opportunities which have been opened. And this will give us a quick effect. It doesn't mean that we should not restore lending and crediting. Well, definitely we have to do that. But the question is in a different plane. The answer is in a different plane. Currently, the liquidity of the banks, which is free liquidity of the banks, is even surplus. And it was will be sufficient for 10-15% growth to the portfolio, and it will not meet the demand which exists at present. So this demand could be satisfied at the expense of the investment. And I would like to put the question to Sevki, because financial institution is an institutional investor, and the question of long money, because at present about 40% of clients say that they would like to develop at the expense of the loans. 70% of those say that they need long money for investment purposes. As a rule, in the structure of the portfolios of the bank, these objectives account for 15-20%. That's why there is a big unmet demand, and this creates the basis for the development of the companies. So, Mr. Sevki, your evaluation of that, and to what extent they are ready to participate in it, international foreign investors.
Because we talked about the grey economy, and it is just as vicious, as malicious an element, a nefast element that exists in our economy as the corruption. And it will only be resolved if it is taken on as a collective mission of everybody in the society, businesses, citizens, authorities. When I was living in Italy 25 years ago, you had a law that passed and that held everybody accountable for the VAT receipt, and then all of a sudden you see people getting their receipts from the purchases that they made. In terms of, so if we encourage it that way and make it a collective responsibility, to the extent we reduce the grey economy, then we will be able to stimulate lending, because the lenders then will be in a position to understand the true financial position and reliable financial position of their potential clients. In terms of the foreign lenders, if I understood your question correctly, they will look at the same factors as domestic existing banks do. They would first want to have a reliable, predictable lending climate, particularly in respect of rule of law. They would want to see a stable, economic environment in terms of inflation rates and in terms of other elements. But they would also need projects. What we need to work on is how do we encourage the entrepreneurs, domestic, but as well foreign. And there will have to be ways of this. We have tremendous public resources, and we have to create opportunities, for example, in public-private partnership projects that would then allow bringing in private sector expertise, dynamism, entrepreneurism, together with the public resources and public assets to create opportunities, to create a dynamic for growth and new lending.
Спасибо.
Thank you. One of the bankers of the top banking sector in the US once to the question of what clients are you looking for, how do you nurture your clients, he said, I started to work with the clients who have not been yet born. And Andriy started his intervention from the following. He said that we do not have sufficient number of real entrepreneurs. And the question is how we as a sector are working with the entrepreneurial initiatives before we are actually capable of lending the money to them so that these entrepreneurs will become bankable for us. If we look at the presentation from the previous panel, we can see that 70% of the so-called unicorn companies who are going to be highly capitalized companies and high marginal, they are in the emergent markets. And the Ukraine can contribute to a contributor of this client. What is being done in the sector as far as this issue is concerned? Andriy, can you please tell us how many new entrepreneurs are going to emerge thanks to this program in the future? In reality, not only the banks are working with the clients and prior let's start from a different thing. I would like to support the idea which has been mentioned here. Clients have to comply with the requirements of the banking sector of today. To be compliant, it is necessary to do a lot of homework. And this homework has to be done by the entrepreneurs themselves and the government. And this is where I have to praise, though it's not very popular, but nevertheless, I would like to praise. Well, you know that we in doing business in the conditions of doing business review, we have improved our position up to 80, and we have to praise our government for that. But the client who is not prepared to accept the requirements of the banking sector, but they are very well grounded and they are civilized, so these clients limit themselves in their growth. It is necessary to be open and understandable for the banking sector, and it's profitable. One can claim the loyal interest rate. The client who is compliant to the top standards can tender out his request for lowering for the best offer from the banks. The client taking very tough requirements as far as the financial monitoring is concerned, who decided to stay and work in the shady sector of the economy, unofficial sector, who very soon will be limited in carrying out transaction through the banking sector. And for a long time, this client will remain in the shady sector, in the gray economy, which does not envisage any growth. What needs to be done to create a point of growth for the banking sector using those clients? I'm pleased to see today that many banks which have announced that SMEs are their priority, at present they are nurturing the entrepreneurs, growing the entrepreneurs, educational programs, consultations, creations of hubs, loyalty programs, partnership programs. We start working with if a person starts working with a bank, they can use the spectrum of services on good terms, which gives an opportunity not to distract distract from the main business for looking for the accountant or provider. This is one of the programs we have launched at present, and some colleagues in the banking sector did that as well. So we are interested to bring the entrepreneurs up to the requirements of the banking sector. Whether these efforts are sufficient? No, is my answer. It's a necessary condition, but not sufficient one. Why? Because I can see and I understand what an enormous resource and what a potential for the growth of entrepreneurial activity exists here in Ukraine. Entrepreneurial initiative of SMEs, it's at the level of municipalities. They are down on the bottom. We have been working on decentralization for 2 years. The local budgets have obtained huge resources. They've never seen them before. And the paradox is they don't know what to do with that money, how to work with that money. For the last 2 years, they've put to the deposits 15 to 18 billion hryvnia almost. Don't they have the programs of social economic development of the region? Don't they understand where to invest, how to create jobs, how to carry out tender procedures? They have to learn how to do it. That's why this exercise is for everyone, both for the banking sector, which evolved for the last 2 years enormously, for the municipalities, for the entrepreneurs. If they are not prepared to start working legally, so be prepared to be cornered by yourselves in the future. Understand all the difficulties which come up due to the taxation system. I understand which emerge due to the legal risks and of the unreformed judiciary. But I understand that we live today, here and now, and this is where the life is. And when I'm told that the banks are not ready to take legal risks, well, I can see 2006, 2007, 2005, when in the the banking sector, enormous transactions have been carried out. When the banks were lining up to come into this market. The judicial system was there. It was not reformed, and the risks were here. But the banks were trying to get into this country because there was profitability, there was growth. We have evolved, and now we are emerging from the situation of the stagnation, and we are stronger now. We have realigned our priorities. I remember the quote from Kuchma, who in his memoirs in 2006 quoted himself when he said that Ukrainian economy is not an economy of bourgeois. It's an economy of industrial capital. It's an economy of strong, gigantic companies. And as a result, we have 90% of the economy, which is exports of commodities, and we have only 400,000 entrepreneurs. I love the example of Israel. The country is waging a war, 320 billion of GDP. In 1991, it had 60. 99% of jobs are being created by SMEs in Israel. Their Knesset is discussing of how, on the legal level, to unify the package of documents for SMEs so that each bank would request the same documents to simplify the access to the resources. Standardization for us as the banks is also improvement of the risk management. I would like this sort of a discussion because a lot is being done, a lot has to be done in the future. And I understand that I am not going to have an opportunity to talk, so I would like to support the ideas, the question of the toxic assets. We have inherited the toxic portfolio since 2004, and it really poisons everything we do, from short-term currency and the problem borrowers which we have. It is a matter of principle for us to find a way out of this situation, resolution of this situation. With the non-performing loans. We are ready to this discussion, the expert discussion at the level of, I don't know, NGOs, civil society, in the parliament. We have to free our books from the NPLs to start developing. And if we don't do that, we cannot, we will be not able to discuss the prospective development. The statistics, 35% of Ukrainians are ready to leave the country, and I'm really concerned about the statistics. 65% of these are people within the age brackets of 18-35. Did you look at the demographic situation in this country? What can we talk about if we are not going to keep these young people here? The students who have left get education in Poland, and only 2% of those see an opportunity to come back to Ukraine. That's why there is no alternative. In my understanding, there is no alternative, does not exist. We have to do this homework, and it's for all present here. Thank you.
Now I propose to move to questions from the audience, and if possible, please tell me who the question is going to be for. Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Sergei Petik, Financial Director, Core Capital Steps. There was this Marshall Plan, sort of, and the question is the following. How realistic this plan is? And secondly, how is this going to influence the cost of resources in Ukraine? And finally, with the help of which instruments, channels, and institutions these resources are going to make it to the real sector? That's a question to everyone, but I don't know who should be the specific addressee. Probably Oksana, I guess. Okay, is the representative from Ministry of Finance. I can't comment anything on the Marshall Plan because this is an idea which is now still in the discussion. There's an initial MP group that does the negotiation. So for now, the discussion of this issue is not on from the side of Ministry of Finance or government, but actually I can answer in general. I think that now we have a unique opportunity when Ukraine is again on the radar of most investors, and in part this is the result of the reforms that we held. In part it's global, in part it's economic restoration, which is not now widespread, and it's from the different where there is restoration now and there is positive expectation now. It is very important not to miss it, because during the last 25 years we had a situation when the country actually was a country of this great possibilities, and we did it. We actually made it, and it was then we had this mistaken decision. So the key things like judicial reform, restoring the right of the creditors, they're extremely important and global. But we all understand that even if everything is done in this direction, these reforms are going to take 3 to 5 years to have this result. We don't have this. So that we do it, and then we have to say, the investors, please come in. So that's why it seems to me that doing everything to reform these fields, we are doing this kind of things, bringing by the hand and talking to those investors and our exporters who can do it. And to do this, our branch offices in the government about facilitating experts and facilitating involving investments works on both the systemic things here, but also on kind of things targeted for investors to solve their issues, because the best postals and propagandists of Ukraine in the world are those already working. And as for this, this our infrastructure requires a lot of investments, but I have to say that during the last year we had conversations with many potential investors, and when we talked about big funds which work with 500 million investors, the problem is not about finding the funds, it's about offering a high-quality project to the investors, because we have a great level of investment companies, 20 to 50 million. And if we talk about if there is a state program, a big one, then if we're talking about infrastructure stations, either legally we're not ready or physically we don't have a project where we could say, okay, this is a project where we can invest $2 billion or $3 billion into it. So I think that when where there is this we should actually be very quick in this, and we really have to know where to invest this money. Okay, hello, my name is Dalichenko. We are a Ukrainian producer of plant protection for agriculture, and I have something to say to the Ministry of Finance. Please let go the tax system, because you can't imagine how it is hard to find a good accountant in the village. It's even hard in the provinces. I mean, there are all these changes in the tax reporting. Please make this reporting system as simple as possible. And just believe us, lots of great enterprises is going to leave the shadow, because I'm talking to them and they're saying, you know what, our accountant doesn't understand how to do it. So they have to sell their stuff for cash, and also asking the other enterprise to sell something for them, because physically they are just unable to actually register. This is not to be mistaken, because you have to pay dear for the mistake. That's one recommendation. Another, you were saying that we have to look for foreign investors. There are lots of Ukrainian investors, and also our company. Every year, at least 150 million hryvnias we invest into the development of our own enterprise. We build new production capacities and all that. So, for example, in many state banks, unfortunately, there is a simplified system of getting a loan for buying foreign equipment or using some other loan interest. And just for Ukrainian enterprises, you have access to the tax database. Look at the real economy sector, the one that produces some, that pays a lot of money. And they have to work with the state banks so that they are able to invest in the development of their production, to actually work with them. And this is not about influencing the inflation in Ukraine, but also actually bringing the impetus for machine building in Ukraine. Okay, I got it. Yes, we have very little time, And if you don't have any separate questions, it was like a comment. Okay. If I have to react. For the first question, I'm a bit surprised because it seems to me that those changes that we made to the tax code during the last 2 years, they significantly simplified the tax legislation. Instead of 22 taxes, there are 8. And of course, the administration and the behavior of state fiscal service, yes, we still have to improve it. But during the last years, for the first time that I hear that an accountant cannot register these documents, because I think that in simplifying the forms and the audits and reporting, a lot has been done. If there are some specific things, please say, and actually I think that it has happened. Then the access to there is nothing there, and I hope that the banks, they might have or might not have, and even if these banks are going to do these commercial banking activities, as for the programs, the program of helping this agricultural machine building is already there. The company still should be bankable, so we are ready to help and compensate some part and make it this loan longer, but the bank should evaluate and actually issue this commercially correct loan, and we are to help the company which wants to do that. And for us, actually, Ukrainian business is just as important, if not more important than foreign investments. You just have to involve foreign investors here, and if the rules are going to change, the investment field will change, Ukrainian business is going to get advantages first of all. So for both directions, we're ready to work if there are specific provisions to do it. And just a short comment here. I totally agree here to what you were saying, but about the complexity of reports, new norms and all that. Today, in the morning, you were saying that Ukraine is among leaders of implementing cryptocurrency. I mean, we are leaders in such directions in a very complicated one. So here is just a regular one as report form or finance and whatever, profit and loss. Without joking, I would say that what's happening in the banks, and I think that the bankers already know about it and they're dreaming about it, becomes even more and more practical. I mean, we're very, very close to digital technologies of mass consumption by our clients. It is in the priorities. You can ask the bankers, they will say that it's already financed and the budgets have been funded. And I mean, it is in a close perspective, it's not many years. So what was also said very soon, there will be this bill on digital rights or something like that for those who are not involved in all this enough. And I think that the role association is very important because from the government we might not get it. And it's not just about the loans, it's also about reporting using digital technologies and this digital signatures. Now we spend a lot of money, too much money, because there is no harmonization of these issues in mass consumption. So the bank is going to do it with our clients in here, but I still ask, while the associations are present here, so that we actually accelerate this business initiative. Thank you. Okay, just several comments. 2 comments. In the package that we propose, there is outsource of accounting for 100 hryvnias. By the way, this is the package which is proposed by our enterprise. The second comment. State Oschadbank also offers loans with reduced interest rate for Ukrainian agriculture enterprises. It's less than 20% interest rate. That was a piece of advertising, right? And other state banks also do that, right? Are there any more questions? Yeah, Kostyan Tachenko, agricultural portal Altifundist.com. Continuing the agricultural sector topic, one of the topics was actually agricultural loans. And there is a question to all the bankers here. Could you tell us, please, what would be the percentage of agricultural currency in your portfolio which is overdue, and how do you think this is going to be influenced by the opening land market? Thank you. Okay, I'll try. Sometimes they call us agricultural bank. It's pleasant for us to hear it, but we're not just cultural, but still. Okay. Up to 50% of our portfolio, this is agricultural business in different stages, including production and processing. So there is a big share there. Second thing, quality of loans in the agricultural sector is the best quality in comparison with other sectors. So the probability of default is not more than 3%. There is maybe not even more than 2%. I can't say for sure, but it's much better than we have with other things. Then the third question was about what? Okay, the land reform. Actually, during the last times, something that we call as a baseline with this crediting. I mean, all this is not a driver for developing the loans. This is the business, the responsibility, and the knowledge, and I mean the land as the subject of finance. If it's going to have any effect only after the land market is created and it becomes liquid, just as other valuable goods. But for now, just opening the land from private ownership without creating the land and mass operations, it won't cause any mass loans. Thank you. Okay, 3/4 of all loans that we give during the last 2 years, that's agricultural for small and medium business. If we say it in general, then during the last year of all that, the quality of portfolio is really very high. And this is a very promising field. So we'd hope that it should develop more actively. But what we were saying, of course, it has to comply with the requirements that are now put forward by the banking system. Business and agricultural sector should also, and we already see this is happening, they have to think in the parameters of business plan and reporting, beneficiary ownership and all that. But as for the accounting, we're going to help with that through outsourcing.
It's about 20% or so of our annual business goes to agri-finance. And when you take only the private sector, it's probably about 40% plus. But of course, we work with major enterprises in the agricultural sector. We're trying to go down the scale as part of our small business effort to smaller enterprises. But the broad funding, access to finance for agriculture has to come from the efforts of the bankers that you see here. And we would support that in a variety of ways, either lines of credit or other capacity building efforts. In terms of land reform, I think it needs to be very carefully managed, particularly making sure that the financing or the conditions for financing of land acquisition is there. Otherwise, you run the risk of either a failure of the reform or a very serious diversion, at least temporarily, of resources from working capital needs to the land acquisition needs, which will be counterproductive to the objective. So it's still, you know, we have been working with the ministry and other IFIs on how to assist that financing side of the land reform, and we still need to do some work. So I hope that it will continue to be a topical subject for progression of Ukrainian agriculture and economy overall.
Are there any more comments? I think it is rather telling that the questions are now mostly from the agricultural sector. Is what Lavrenchuk was saying today, that small amount of fields today have these loans available for the price that there is now. And I would really be willing to for the number of interests that are going to ask questions and that actually are going to have access to finance, and there are going to be more of them, because the potential of actually import replacement, which is now one of the basis for us as a country, it is actually in different field, because all this agricultural field, which is already on a high level, and the returns that we actually see during the last years there, they are radically different from the returns that we can see in the other fields. Do we have any more questions? Yes, if I may just have a small remark to make, and a question as well. I mean, we were talking about who we should give the loans to. Actually, this is an economic utopia, because the banks are also entrepreneurs and also business structures, just like everyone else. And they give the loans to those where they can get as much profit as it's like 100% interest, and for business will be 20%. And that's not about earning, that's just the interest rate. So you can't do anything, but, and there's the second remark. Volodymyr would actually take it. So the bank is here, and maybe Andriy. Actually, we shouldn't be teaching what we are working with, and probably is that the bank should work with what they have, and I hope for some improvement. And actually, I have a certain question. It's not an agricultural sector, industrial enterprise, 95% of import. I have 2 or 3 competitors in the world, and I have the following question. Would you offer a product? My competitors supply products with the payment delay of 2 or 3 years. I can't afford that. With the interest rates that we have here in Ukraine, and even though still they have a competitive advantage. So this is what should the banks propose to me so that I could actually supply these products with the payment delay of 2 or 3 years. And the second question is to the Ministry of Finance. Do we have any financial long-term policy for like 10 years? Or are we simply looking to a year ahead and that's all? I mean, we work with the budget and that's it. Or are there any priorities out of which there are annual budget bills, so maybe 3-year budget bills? Thank you. Actually, I can start because the first topic is more detailed. Last year, it's for the first time that we went to midterm budgeted. I mean, starting from 2000, Ministry of Finance dreamt of doing it, but it never managed to. Last year, we offered this 3-year budget resolution. So the strategic plans are there. There are 5-year plans which are built. But actually, the financial security of strategic planning this year is for the first time that we tried. We submitted the budget resolution for 2018, 19, and 20. Unfortunately, the Parliament is supported, though the Cabinet of Ministers approved it. So this is already 3 budgets for 3 years. The Parliament looked at it and just took into account. The Ministry of Finance and the Cabinet of Ministers are going to work with the new variant of the budget code, which we hope until the new year is also going to be approved, so that the 3-year budget planning, I mean the standard of the European standard, which has been standard for a long time, becomes a regulatory part of our budget process, so that the business will be able to see the state budget and the forecast for 3 years, and then each following annual budget which is adopted on this kind of rolling basis, as they say, is going to correspond to the goals which are already put into it. So for many countries, even the 3-year budgeting is already a big breakthrough, and I hope that we'll be able to do it starting from the following year. It will be our obligatory standard, because for us it is obvious that this is an obligatory thing for the business to plan ahead, at least 3 years ahead, and understand where we are moving in our forecasts.
Interesting, and it's a challenge for our banking system. But I would say that it is a perfect, really, case for working on structured finance transactions. And some European banks are extremely good at this thing. You have to cover the both end of the spectrum, i.e. the supplier end and the buyer end. And some Swiss banks, Dutch banks, they're very good at working with the buyers that you have. So what I would suggest for Ukrainian banks to do is to create these strong partnerships with 2, 3 good structured finance banks that would work on the domestic end here, and the foreign partner will work on the buyer end of the spectrum, and then you would be able to sell your goods just as competitively as others.
Последний вопрос, если можно.
Можно, да? Я прошу прощения, если кого-то перебил.
Well, I am sorry I've interfered. the group of companies of MTI, Boris-Ilyansky, the trade, distribution, and other things. I'd like to put the question to the Ministry of Finance. All of us here are shopping in the shops, in the supermarkets, in the trade centers, and we can see good, big chains which are working on the basis of the legal entities, entrepreneurs' legal entities. These are the companies with a huge turnover, millions turnover. When I'm buying cigarettes in the little shop in Kreshchatyk, and I get the pack of cigarettes, and on the check I have 20% VAT. But if I'm buying in the internet or in the big store in the chain, I don't get a fiscal check. This spring the law has been passed that the very complex electronic technology should be sold through the cash registers. But we see that the trade continues without the cash registers, and this is done not only by the small companies, by the big businesses. So why no measures are not being taken? Why this law is not being enforced? And the state does not receive the sufficient amount of taxes, and the shady market and grey market is flourishing, and we have been working on this issue for 3 years, and this echoes what Andriy said. Every time the Ministry of Finance offers the amendments to the existing system on the single tax, there is a huge opposition, and we are being accused of strangling the small businesses. Our position was absolutely consistent for the last 3 years. The system of the single tax should be for those for whom it has been created, for real small businesses, but little shops, coffee shops, where the entrepreneur works himself or herself. But we have seen 1,700,000 entrepreneurs, and only 400,000 of those are entrepreneurs, and all the rest are the cashiers, the security people who are getting these certificates of the physical persons entrepreneurs, but they are not working as entrepreneurs. And as the public, first of all, protects not us when certain things happen. Starting from the 1st of January, the tax police is under very uneligible status. Well, we have identified the time framework of a month, and the Parliament is going to start discussing the draft law of the financial police or financial investigation service. There should be one body which would be created on the basis of the new standards, new people, stuffed with new people who will have some trust on the part of the business, and they will have to do some unpopular things against those who are avoiding paying taxes. And we have been working on this draft law with the 3 associations. It has been submitted to the Parliament, and I think that this is a joint position, not only the Ministry of Finance, but all the financial body. We are moving towards cashless, and this is the best safeguard and the best stimulus to decrease the grey economy, to use the cashless transactions, and it's more convenient for people, and there is more control over the turnover. And we support you, we are with you, but this is one of the unpopular and very complex decisions which are to be taken to protect the honest official business, which lives in accordance with the standards as it is quoted in the book and the textbook. Well, it's a complex issue. We understand these problems, and you can see that we've done a lot within the last 2 years to decrease the field for offences, but we understand that there is a lot of work to be done in the future. Our panel discussion is coming to its end, and I would like to ask each participant of this panel discussion to give some, closing remarks and to give the forecast. Well, we have mentioned that within 3 years we are going to restore lending. How many new credits in billions we can expect for the economy? Мені дуже важко давати ці прогнози і оцінки, але я дивився на різні цифри, коли я йшов сюди. Я так побачив, що корпоративне кредитування було 20 мільярдів євро в цій системі. І цього недостатньо, звичайно, для того потенціалу економіки, який має Україна. Таким чином, якщо
10% to 15% a year, then we would be at least making some difference. I mean, in the country that Engin and I come from, the banking system sometimes grew 25, 30, 35% per annum. It has risks, of course, but as long as you create the right projects for it, then these risks can be contained. And EBRD, we will continue trying to finance as much as we did in the past. You know, this was on average €1 billion a year, and I hope we will hit that number this year and in the future years. But it all very much depends on, again, this system's ability to prepare and process the projects.
Erik.
I would like to raise a key issue today in Ukraine for the business. It's demographic factor. In 1990, about 18 million people were working in the production sectors, agriculture, transport, communication. At present, we have less than 9 million. 7 million have left outside this country, 2 million have not been born and retired. If the current demographic situation is being preserved, if we are not going to change anything and everything is the way it is, and it's inevitable because at present, more people are retiring than no children come and no students come to their jobs. And the 12 years education, which is envisaged by the reform, deteriorates this situation. So we lose those who might have taken the jobs. So if nothing changes, in 10 years' time, we are going to have 7 million employed. But if 1 million or 2 million people leave Ukraine, we are going to have only 6 or 7 million people working, but a number of pensioners will be 11, 12 million. So at present, each employed person is serving more pensioners, like 2 pensioners. From the point of view of economy, what happened? The wage has been increased by 40%. And the next year, it's going to increase by 20% more. And what can we see in the market and what can we see in the economy? Inflation is growing. And this is one of the reasons of the growing inflation. And when the business comes to get a cheap loan, the business now is being working between the two dangers, high interest rates and the growing wages, on the other hand. So the marginality of businesses being decreased. The state at present has to immediately think of how to restore the situation in the labor market. The visa-less regime was welcomed by everyone. It's great for the people. They have an alternative to work in Poland or in Ukraine. And, we understand that the wages as soon as the war has been increased, the wages are started to grow in Ukraine, taking into account the quality of life in Poland and Ukraine. But from the point of view of the state, in some time from now, a short period of time, I'd like to emphasize, we are going to think not about pension reform, but we will think about the preservation of the sort of pay-as-you-go pension system, because the state is going to respond very simply to increase the taxes, and the business will face the third element of pressure, that is the tax pressure, increase of the taxes. So the problems here are much deeper, and demography, unfortunately, is not an issue which is being resolved quickly. It is easier to reform the judiciary, but not to change the demography. But so how much in terms of lending we are going to provide to the economy? The bankers are going to lend, so let them answer. If on at the end of the banks and financial sector, we can see a lot of trends. But I would like to talk about the two major ones which are going to have an impact on the lending. First of all, it's the decrease of the interest rate to the level when the loans could be affordable and accessible on a mass scale. And the second, and we believe into it, the simplification of the processes, of all the processes, identification, reporting and transactions, payments. And I think that it will take another 18 months from my point of view. And we are going to find the situation of the accessible loans using the simplified technologies in the banking sector. So the question, the victory or betrayal, my answer is the victory.
In the Turkish crisis, the banking system shrank below $70 billion. Today it is more than $700 billion. But in the meantime, we did all the reforms that we could do to bring the Turkish economy up to an acceptable level. Now, today, don't we have any problems? Of course. We have shadow economy? Yes. We have people avoiding taxes or evading taxes? Yes. Are we losing discipline that we used to have at those times? Yes. Let's not guesstimate, but let's make sure that we do our homework and we stick to it.
My comment is that it's a victory which will require a very difficult work to do, because the Prime Minister very specifically told about the priorities of the government for this and the next year, and with the stabilization of the background, and we have to maintain it, these fundamental things like macroeconomics and stabilization and public finance have to be under control. And the key priority is development of the economy. That's why the support of exports should not be a campaign. The companies should get access to finance. So support of export, attraction of investment, and enabling the businesses which create the jobs in Ukraine. And the jobs which create added value. So no matter whether these are micro entrepreneurs, small entrepreneurs, well, we have to treat them fairly. If we are talking about the state banks, there are tools to address all these issues. We have Exim Bank, which has to focus its attention to promote and support export. We have Oschadbank, which is developing its capacity, institutional capacity in micro lending and nurturing, growing the clients. I'm not going to tell you how much it is going to grow, but the only thing I can tell, it depends on how efficient we are in our reforms and to what extent we get the trust from the business and to what extent the banks trust us. If we see some extra liquidity, well, they do not invest this extra liquidity into the state bonds. That's why I can see the main task here to support this trust of the banks, so that the banks would be able to unleash their potential quicker and to use their funds to lend to real sector. The next 24 months are going to be full of proactive events. Somebody mentioned the Marshall Plan today. As far as I'm concerned, in certain aspects it has been implemented already. Well, maybe we have not named it a Marshall Plan, but the number of investment fora and regional investment fora, the communication and discussions have never been observed before. And the proactiveness of the government, the pressure on the parliament, I haven't seen since long ago. And I think that this is the part of the Marshall Plan, if you wish, which is being implemented with the help of the international financial organizations, EBRD, International Monetary Fund, and alike. But we have to do the homework. Without the homework, the number of entrepreneurs which will be able to claim the support from the financial sector will be limited. We we are working the way you do. We are not teaching you how to work, but we have to understand if we do not comply to each other's requirements, your ability and capacity will be limited by our requirements. And this is true because we are now using the international standards for financial reporting. And maybe the correct answer will be not the amount of lending, but the quality of lending. We have to change the priorities of the banking sector. 25 top banks at present really consider SMEs as the priority in their work, and these top 25 banks see the development there. I'm also pleased to see that people say that doesn't matter where the product has been manufactured in Poland, Ukraine, or EU. It's been manufactured in the internet, and if this happens, it will be the epoch of SMEs, and they invest into this exercise 1 billion. So I think that everything is going to develop very quickly, and the banking sector is a resource of the quality, and it will lend to the borrowers who need that and who comply with the requirements of quality. I would like to thank all the participants of the panel discussion and would like to thank the audience for interesting questions. So we can summarize that the lending is going to increase, the interest rates are going to decrease and more accessible, and maybe there will be not that many requirements because transparency and honesty is a choice, and the next 2-3 years are going to be a very good time for those who wish to reform the sector and to restore the lending position.